5th, 2024. It's quite a struggle tonight, holy goodness. We had to do a new session. Somebody was trying to shut us down again. They hit me quite a few different ways. Seems to be happening a lot more lately, doesn't it? I'm back though. I'll get rid of me that quick. The headless. Such a strange story tonight. I'm a little bit backwards. Let me check the date here because my mind is just rattled after all that experience. Yeah, so it's the 5th of December, 2024. I'm Dana. Hope you're doing well. We got a poll. You can call in, by the way. Should Japanese dump 30 million one-ton bags of radiation on Japan's federal government's building steps and the universities? Well, that's enough. That's enough to contaminate every government building in Japan. There's enough radiation there to kill everybody in Japan too. Anyway, let's get after it. We got a single story to cover tonight. That makes it cool. We're going to use the time machine a little tiny bit here. Just worn out now, just struggling to get running. Had a hell of a time just getting the computer to start up. And I finally had to go into safe mode and then pick a new session. And I don't want to give too much away, but it was no fun. I guess they don't like me talking about the one-ton bags. That's too bad. Delivery. So this is a story from 2000. We're going to cover this story after in more detail. I think it's 2016 or delivery. Let me go to the big screen and just put my big head in there to mess everything up. Delivery of radioactive soil to interim storage begins in Fukushima. They're negotiating with 2,400 landowners. Total estimate of 22 million cubic meters. It's equal to 22 million one-ton trucks driving past your house. How long will that take? Just work it out on your calculator while you're doing the show. There's actually 30 million one-ton pickup trucks that they acknowledge. If they picked up 50% of the prefecture, you can have both sides of the highways right around the entire planet look like that right there with one-ton bags of radiation. Like the amount we're talking about is holy smokerooey. So this was a story today. The Japanese cabinet to discuss disposal of Fukushima soil from the decontaminated sites, suggesting that picking up 3% of the tops, or 3% of the land's topsoil, which is 2 centimeters less than an inch, 3/4 of an inch. Try to go out and scrape up 3/4 of an inch of your topsoil, and tell me if that's what you would say is cleaning up, because clearly that's not cleaning up, is it? And he didn't do that. By the way, we've been covering this since 2011. So they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but they never had no meltdowns. As of August the 24th, 2023, right? How does that work? No nuclear meltdowns. The government plans to expand the scope of the ministries and agencies. So this is one of the main reasons, not the only reason, but an interesting, a very important point of this story is that particular facet. That the government plans to expand the scope of the ministries and agencies involved in the management of the soil from the current limited number of organizations, including the Environmental Ministry, and clarify its stance on tackling the problem from various angles. But we're talking about radiation. And the paper suits can't protect you. 1-ton bags can't protect you. Just walk down the street like that, full of 1-ton bags of radiation, and you're breathing in so much radiation. There's no way you're not going to have horrific, catastrophic health issues down the road from it. They had 150,000 sites like this. This is the picture from the story today. A lot of these pictures clearly are pictures I made up. When you see a picture like that, you're like, Dana made that picture. And you'll be right. Congratulations. You just won a nickel. And my prediction is you're going to see Geiger counter vending machines everywhere. If the truth ever comes out. If the truth ever comes out, buy shares in Geiger counters because you'll be richer than Bill Gates, the monster. No time at all. The government's plan to convene a meeting of all cabinet ministers, which is quite an interesting statement, all cabinet ministers, this month to discuss concrete measures of handling the soil removed from decontaminated sites. Picking up 3% of the land is not decontamination. If you want to clean, if your house gets flooded, you're on vacation, come back, your house is completely flooded, and you clean up 3% of your house, is that cleaning up your house? Or if you paid a contractor to repair your house and you came back and they said job is done, when you got back it was only 3% of your house was repaired. And it was not repaired really, it was just they painted over the damage with garbage paint. They made the paint themselves and then painted over 3% of the damage and told you that they fixed everything. Everything's great, have a nice time, and our contract is now resolved. You'll be looking for a lawyer, right? This is quite different. This is infinitely worse than that assertions, right? The final disposal outside the prefecture of the soil is supposed to take place by 2045. And that's a really interesting statement because they're dumping it and growing food in it. 30 million 1-ton bags of radiation is 5 rows of 1-ton pickup trucks wrapped around the planet, bumper to bumper. And a half. So 5 rows of 1-ton trucks, bumper to bumper, with a 1-ton bag. Now, they're not 1-ton bags, clearly, right? AI screws you over sometimes, right? But everything is useful, and we'll do it anyway. The removed soil is the topsoil scraped from the ground during the decontamination work carried out in residential and agricultural areas, which was 3%. They spent $27 billion or something. That was 2019, wasn't it? How do we get down there? That was 2019. I was just setting up the phone in case somebody calls in. So they carried out in residential agricultural areas, but what about the rest of the country? You can't do nothing in the forest. And 97% of the prefecture, such a strange story, isn't it? It's such a complicated story that there's almost no hope of anybody working it out on their own, unless they've been at it for a very long time. And that's the only reason we're able to, is because we've been at it since a very long time. We've been at it since day one. Now they want you, the idea of telling you the stuff they tell you is to convince you that they cleaned it up, that it's decontaminated, that everything they touched is now 100 bars. So Fukushima is just a single prefecture, but 14 prefectures that I highlighted here for you were the prefectures that were banned by 55 countries for a decade. Just give me 1 second, because my microphone stand is being disturbed by... Damn you, Stan! I don't want the stand to be touching the desk because it makes noises. Clickety click. So 14 prefectures, food banned by 55 countries for over a decade. James Lucid says they wore the same paper suits for COVID. And that's an incredible great point, by the way, because how can a paper suit protect you at a nuclear meltdown? It can't, right? So now they're saying they got 13 million cubic meters of soil, not radioactive soil, but soil. And the Kuma and Fukushima, which are abandoned, which are joined on both, there's north and south, south and north respectively, joined onto the actual nuclear plant site. These are abandoned nuclear wastelands. So, but 13 million cubic meters is just a little more than 1/3 of the 1-ton bags that they picked up. 75% of the soil has a density of radioactive cesium of 8,000 atoms or less per kilogram. So let's just do the numbers on that, though, because you can sugarcoat everything, and this was a number they've been tossing around for a very long time, but I'm going to introduce you to other numbers per kilogram, like 10 million atoms per kilogram, and maybe in a little bit. So you got to take 8,000 atoms, aka becquerels. A becquerel is the energy each second from a pulse of each atom. So there's 8,000 pulses, almost at the speed of light per kilogram, if you go by their numbers, which is a fatal mistake. And you got to multiply it by 66.6 to get a cubic meter, which is 500,000 atoms of anthropogenic man-made atoms of gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. So they're going to be crashing into each other, the energy, that breaking effect. There's 500,000 becquerels, which is the energy, which pulses in every direction, by the way. It's not like it just pulses in one direction. So they're going to be hitting each other. That's full body X-rays for anything in that, anything within 600 feet of that square meter. They're going to grow, and they're growing food in that, by the way. Okay, so you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas hitting each other, almost at the speed of light each. And what happens, that's known as an X-ray, because when they hit each other, they don't mingle. They hit each other, they change direction. This flash of energy is created, and that's known as an X-ray. And the result of that is anything or anybody in proximity to that is getting a full body X-ray every second. And that's what we're talking about, is more than enough to sterilize any species, any biota, any fungus, any bacteria, to kill that too. And without bacteria and fungus, eventually the whole all the forests will be tinder dry. So over the next couple of years, when you get a lightning strike, you have massive forest fires because the ground is not soaking up water anymore. The government is considering using soil at 8,000 atoms or less in public. So a becquerel is the energy from an atom. So instead of calling it a becquerel, because that's how a becquerel is considered a decay, but there could be a million. Well, you know, there's 60 decays a minute, and there's 1,440 minutes a day, and that can go on for a million years. So the idea, because you don't understand the bigger picture, the majority of people, you think it's decayed, right? Well, it didn't. That's just the pulse of energy. So calling it a decay is how they manipulate you and deceive you and make you complacent to incredible harm that's being produced. So they want to use it as a base for asphalt and road constructions. after taking measures to prevent the radiation from spreading, but you can't prevent the radiation from spreading because water will permeate, especially like the typhoons they have down there, incredible amounts of water, right? And these become saturated, and and so what we've seen is a betrayal in every step of the way for the universities, the medias, and particularly the lunatic nuclear industry. It's planned to finalize the disposal of the remaining soil in landfills. Real nice people. It plans to finalize the disposal of the remaining soil in landfills. It's not soil, it's radioactive waste. And landfills is your local dumps which are unlined, right? So that's going to end up in your water tables. The government has conducted feasibility tests to confirm safety in Fukushima Prefecture, such as harvesting cucumbers and radishes in the wasteland where soil has been covered with normal soil. So there was a lot of stuff, like the farmers, they didn't clean up those fields. You can't clean up nuclear wasteland anyway. What they done was they brought in more, they said more topsoil that they got from somewhere else in the same prefecture, slash the nuclear wasteland. And we're in paper. It's the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society that are doing the work on top of that. It's not academics and scientists and corporations or anything like that. It's the most vulnerable of society who don't understand the stuff you understand right now. If you never watched another video, just watch this much, you have more knowledge than the typical worker could ever dream of having. The homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. And so we've heard this narrative before. You might not have, but we have. The government has conducted a feasibility test. The government has conducted, the government has confirmed safety. They're the very last ones that you want to confirm it. You can't quantify an assertion like that. It simply can't be done. When you're talking about 3% of the land, where you picked up 1-ton bags, which has nothing to do with cleaning up radiation. So it's very confusing, no matter who you are. Bear with me. Yeah, we had a hell of a time getting the show up and running today. Just getting the computers up and running was a disaster. And this industry deserves your attention. You cannot remain silent with what they're doing. That's the worst thing we can do, is remain silent. So, I mean, they're so crazy. They're growing food right alongside of 1-ton. Now, the criteria for the 1-ton bags for radiation was 100,000 atoms per kilogram, not 8,000. And we're talking about curium isotopes is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, which is one of the worst isotopes you can imagine. And it'll be here long after the human experience has faded from the memory of the planet, let alone the memory of the physical structures. It'll still be here killing everything, trying to repopulate the planet. Any kind of insect or bird or biota will be permanently snuffed out. You don't even need a nuclear meltdown for that to happen. You just need fuel pools. They're hemorrhaging so much radiation every day, you're guaranteed to kill the planet. But it's a slow kill. It takes a long time to manifest. It shows up in many, many diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary. All these numbers will start skyrocketing. You've seen every time you get your hair done, I do this myself. I go to a different hairdresser. And I'm pretty quiet, pretty meek, and I'll start slowly asking questions because the hairdressers love to chatter and they love to gossip too, right? And so I'll ask them, have they been hearing about a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia? And they're like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. We were just saying it this morning. You hear it every single time. And you say, well, how about autism and Down syndrome? They're like, oh my God, it's crazy. It's spiked like mad. We never seen nothing like it. And then you ask them about heart attacks, and they're saying it's insane, right? And they'll talk about their loved ones that have died recently. Just random young too, right? And just because you never stopped growing food in a nuclear wasteland, shipping it worldwide. Canada was one of the worst places to be. Playing past the parcel with Fukushima 2016. So in 2016, they had 30 million tons of these, and these bags deteriorate after 3 years. So they're talking about 30 million 1-ton bags of radiation that needs to be repackaged every 3 years. You simply can't do it. And because the doses that are put into these bags at 100,000 atoms a kilogram, right, there's 1,000 kilograms in each bag. Now they're only acknowledging gamma. They're so far removed from reality, and those stacks. That's a very small one. In 2016, they had 30 million. There was 150,000 sites. In 2019, they had 105,000 sites. And this is not considered a single spot. That's not one of 105,000 at that time. Just let me come back up here for a second. Did I miss... All right, here we go. We're back on. Only 10% of the population returned to Fukushima town. September the 5th, 2016. So this town was abandoned from 2011 to 2016. They started moving people back into the nuclear wasteland in Naraha. Now, Naraha was there was a big incentive to build in that community. 680 people returned to the 7,300. The residents who have resumed farming, the town's key industry, and they're really close to the ongoing nuclear meltdowns. They're right at ground zero, and they resume farmings. Located in the district of Fukushima, this is a picture of Naraha. Naraha had over 2 million 1-ton bags. That's going to come up here at some point. Another Fukushima farmer, it's already bad as Chernobyl. Baby cows are dying one after another. Really, in a nuclear wasteland. Never dreamt that could happen. Mayor near Fukushima have lost almost all body hair from the chest down. Nosebleeds, this was true for children. Their nosebleeds didn't stop for like a couple of years. They were only allowed out to go to school. And there was a lot of kids didn't gain more than like 1 pound in a year. If you picked up Fukushima's topsoil, just 2 centimeters, not counting all the other radioactive prefectures, just Fukushima prefecture, you can build a highway with 1-ton bags on both sides of it like that around the entire planet, and you still never got jack shit of it. So when it comes to radioactive fallout, because you can't perceive it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or anything like that, you can't perceive it. You get lulled because you can't see it, right? So you get lulled into this complacency. Fukushima monthly fallout was higher in 2012 than 8 months before that in June. So this was evidence of ongoing criticality. And you got to put it into perspective that they left a lot of communities. They didn't do nothing. And this row here is atoms per kilogram. Like the betrayal of the nuclear industry has. These people should all be in jail for the rest of their lives for what they got done. They abandoned so many, millions and millions of people to protect an industry that has no right to exist in the first place. Particles were falling on us from the sky, radioactive dust, after Reactor 1 exploded. You can build a highway like that right around the planet multiple times, full of 1 ton bags both sides, and still have nowhere near what landed just in Japan, let alone Canada and the United States. If you were to pick up all the radioactive fallout in Canada, it would look like this. You can build a highway right around the planet, it would look like that. And the same thing for the United States. The industrial pollution, which is way bigger than the anthropogenic fallout that we're talking about, the Trans-Pacific Corridor, air corridors, that's automobile pollution, industry pollution. Pre-Fukushima was added for several months each year to the pollution indexes in California, for instance. Because the way the wind comes across, and then the pollution would linger over California for several months, which is the breadbasket, one of the breadbaskets for North America. Fukushima monthly fallout 10 times higher than last September. That's April 1st, 2012. And if you could pick up everything, they can only pick up a ton. If they did scrape the topsoil, the majority of the country's trees, right, or the prefecture's trees. It's not just Fukushima prefecture, but the majority of the prefecture is trees. So they didn't pick, the food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade, and they picked up 1 ton bags there too. We're only talking about Fukushima, and we're only talking about picking up bags in just 3% of Fukushima, where residential and farmland. And this is the opposite of any kind of rationale. Lessons learned from an extraordinary case of soil. So this is 2019. The affected area, which of course now officially there is no meltdown. As of last year, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, and International Atomic Energy Agency have been participating in a propaganda for the Asian population, hoping it'll infect North American, Eastern European, and everybody, that there's only tritium got out. But none of these stories we're talking about got anything to do with tritium. Tritium is never mentioned. This is the meltdowns. These are just each of these are hideously, incomprehensibly worse than Fukushima or Chernobyl. Chernobyl wasn't no joke. Chernobyl was 3 million children have disabilities, according to Kofi Annan in 2000 at the UN podium. And that means they're going to have to be they have healthcare issues for the rest of their life. When you're infected with radioactive plague, because this is a plague, right? That's the only way you can really articulate what we're talking about. It's a plague. And there's no cure for it. That's the biggest issue. And it attacks everything with replicating cells, which makes it frighteningly terrifying. By 2019, Fukushima decontamination efforts had generated about 20 million cubic meters of waste. But that's simply not true, as I showed you earlier. It was 30 million one-ton bags. $30 million one-ton bags. I'll bring that up one more time because you can go read the story yourself. So they like to lie, and they like to like 10 million extra bags is a big deal, okay? It's a significant amount. You go read this story in 2016. They had 30 million one-ton bags. But it's the same thing with the evacuees. They slowly brought the numbers down to make, right? They've done this in increments over a decade. That's their routine, right? And currently they say there is no nuclear meltdowns as of August the 24th last year. And they say whatever got out was equal to 3 grams of sugar. So they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, cost $24 billion to retrieve 3 grams of sugar. See, that doesn't make sense either, does it? If there was no nuclear meltdown, why did they spend $24 billion picking up millions and millions of one-ton bags? The bags of waste are typically stacked 4 layers high, with a 5th layer of uncontaminated soil laid on top to block the radiation. What about the sides? Waterproof sheets are also used to stop rainwater from getting into the bags and becoming contaminated. Well, it don't matter where the water lands in Japan, it's radioactive. It's tritiated, but it's picking up curium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and everything else. It's not just tritiated tritium-3H. Whenever you read a media and it only says tritium, but it doesn't say tritium-38, H3, then they're manipulating you. You should never go back to that media. Negotiations with the town of Akuma Futabar. Negotiations, there's no one there. No one lives there. To establish a midterm waste storage facility, there has been hard going, and the start of construction is nowhere in sight. Again, new studies on the mysterious black substances, curium discharged into the environment likely in the form of fine particles. The curium isotopes are 20 times worse. You need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And you'll hear in time of some particles can be blocked by a sheet of paper. Ignore those people. Anything that can be blocked by a sheet of paper means you have infinitely more in the same spot that can go through 3 buildings and radiate everybody in the next one. New studies on mystery black substance release. This was bacteria. This black bacteria would aggregate radiation. And the numbers were so frightening that when the Geiger counter would just say run. Run away as fast as you can. Don't look back. Fuel core material from the Fukushima plant detected plutonium, uranium-236, curium discharges, plutonium-235 is more like it. Curium discharges into the environment like, now curium has killed all the animals in all the experiments, same as plutonium, of multiple tumors. Typically, that's a bone seeker, right? So it's going to mutate the stem cells of all the species in kids in particular, but it's devastating because you have mutated stem cells, which means you're going to have mutated hormones too. So how do you think your body is going to react to something like a contaminant that has those attributes? It never goes away. And because we're at the top of the food chain, we're dropping in droves of heart attacks and heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. So thyroid, adrenaline, pituitary, these are catastrophic consequences just from those contaminations, right? It's a disaster of all humanity, the entire world. And the reason you see that particular connotation is because the radiation spread worldwide immediately. All the studies from all the institutions and government agencies, this model is based on 19 and a half days, 468 hours. The plume covered the entire planet. So that's the United States, and there's Canada. And I've done research expeditions from Vancouver and Washington area all the way up to Alaska for 6 years. Mass death of species found around Fukushima nuclear plant. They seem to have disappeared. Little or no reproductive success. It is evident biota around the nuclear plant has been affected since the nuclear accident. The biota. Mass death of species. Mass death of species, 2016, February 10th. Like, that's the same paper suits they were wearing in COVID. They're wearing in a nuclear meltdown site. TEPCO said he burned 7,000 of those paper suits every day. 7,000. Imagine trying to burn 7,000 paper suits a day. Simply not true, right? In fact, we got evidence that the homeless and destitute were given second-hand paper suits. This industry is your biggest nightmare, and until the world starts talking about it, this industry will continue to destroy any hope of a future for any species, let alone humans. The mutations have begun in Fukushima. Birds found blind, unable to fly. Birds in tailspins 4 years after Fukushima, the proverbial canary in a coal mine. And the professors, birds with mutations popping up all over in contaminated areas. The whole country is contaminated. The entire country is contaminated. Surge in babies being born with extra arms and legs. Nurse says many are getting abortions to avoid the inconvenient babies. A high number of stillbirths. Many people reporting cancers even far away from Fukushima. And in the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers, excess cancers. And not everybody got health care. Not everybody's diagnosed. Cancer is not the only illness, and disease or autoimmune deficiency or illness or injury. Once your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign, right? And catastrophically so for the elderly. This is that's what they were trying to blame. Like, there's a lot of the deaths in COVID were actually radiation poisoning because the immune system is compromised. So you get a flu. Doesn't have to be a bad flu or anything like that, and that'll kill the elderly. Soil from Fukushima decontamination site to be relocated for demonstration experiment. This is 2020 or something. Don't quote me, I can't remember. The majority fell around the nuclear plant, he said, which is simply not true. The government that began decontamination work, the very least trustworthy, soon after the accident on residential farms and residential and farmlands. Residential and farmlands. Again, right, we keep seeing that connotation. Most of the removed material was surface soil. 14 million cubic meters of soil were removed. Now we know it's actually 30 million cubic meter 1 ton bags. And they're stockpiled at that time in 16 square kilometer storage facility spanning the 2 prefecture towns of Okuma and Fukushima. Fukushima laden with piles of radioactive soil that can't be moved into storage because the bags deteriorate after only meant to last a couple of years. Walking around the village, one can see mounds with green covers over them, concealing flexible containers that hold contaminated soil. That's an interesting way to describe 1 ton bags. Flexible containers and contaminated soil. It's nuclear soil. It's a dirty bomb per kilogram. According to the Ministry of the Environment, the amount of tainted soil, really, they spent $23 billion on tainted soil, really. As of the end of January of that year, roughly 2.4 million cubic meters for the village of Lydiate alone. Just that one village, and people lived there. And he picked up 2.4 million 1 ton bags. 2.4 million. And delivery of the radioactive soil to the interim storage begins in Fukushima. There's no date on this one. 2015. This is 4 years after. The government plans to build depositories on around 16 square kilometers land in Kuma Futaba, which hosts crippled. Like, calling Fukushima crippled is just maniac stuff. It's just completely dishonest. Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency encouraged Japan to reuse the soil and said that they're not a regulatory agency and they can't say whether it's good or bad because they're not a regulatory agency. But every academic on the planet, every nuclear scientist, everybody in the nuclear industry, everybody in governments, everybody in the media knew the reactor fuel pools at the top of the 2 buildings, Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, for instance. There was 4 of these buildings that lost their entire inventories. Each building had around 9 large reactor cores of pure uranium, pure plutonium. So Windscale in 1957, that was a mixed oxide, but it was also a graphite too. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. These reactors were pure uranium, pure plutonium. This was pure uranium, pure plutonium, and it was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. Over the next year, around 43 cubic meters of waste equivalent to less than 1%. So 1% out of 22 million cubic meters in 2016 or 15. 2015 was 22 million cubic meters. But we know they had a total at one point of 30 million cubic meters. We also know they've been dumping it in Chiba and Tokyo, 240 kilometers away, into the river and into the estuaries and into the ocean at nighttime. They can't get rid of their sewage. They can't get rid of the water from the water reclamation filtration systems. They can't get rid of the sediment from the water filtration facilities. They can't get rid of the ashes from the incinerators. And we're talking about a couple of years later, they're still finding short-lived isotopes in the sewage, plus the other isotopes, right? But the short-lived meant, what that meant was there was a ongoing chain reaction of criticality, a continuous nuclear meltdown. And because when you put the reactors exploded, and so what happens? What happens is you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, betas pulled together so it can reignite on the drop of a hat. And because it's so radioactive, you can't get near it. There's really nothing to stop it. Right? There's no way to avoid it melting down. Like when you look at reactor 3, it ejected its reactor cores right out of the buildings. Now there's more caveats to this. Behind reactor 4, that building over there, on the same level, on the same road, is the common spent fuel pool. And in 2021, there was 736 pictures released with no fanfare, no explanations. I'm the only person to ever cover it that I know of. I've never seen anybody ever. There was a Chinese media that I had translated, a story about Fukushima, and it was talking about pictures. And when I scrolled down the page, I seen the links to TEPCO's website, so I clicked on it and started downloading pictures. And it was a total of 10 links or something, with 736 pictures. But they were from a drone very high up in the sky. But when you zoomed in, this is what you saw. This was the common spent fuel pool with around 11 million pounds into it. So why was the common spent fuel pool, the entire area, and particularly like the upper structures, why is that completely pixelated out? Why do you think, and why were these released 10 years later? And why has nobody ever covered it? That's the stump of reactor 4. There's really nothing left. And so this hideous industry, this dirty, rotten, creepy industry, just hang on and bear with me. Let me see if this works for us. They're pretty deceitful, right? Officials reveal the contamination levels at the Fukushima plant are likely higher outside the reactor units than inside. But there is no unit, it's completely gone, right? So they took these buildings, it's quite confusing, right? So they took it and they leveled it down to the ground, almost. But they left a little, because it looked like that, it looks like this. When you zoom in on it, it's pretty rough, right? So they built these contraptions over it. They don't physically touch it. But way up there is where the fuel pool is to, so clearly there's no fuel pool. Fuel pool are at the very top of the building. There's 2 of them, and so is the reactor core. That's reactor 3. That's missing. And they done the same thing there where they built a contraption over it. They cleaned up and built this contraption over it. I'm burnt out from trying to get the show going tonight. It was a little rough. It was really, because I tried 7, 8, 9 times, couldn't get the computer to start. I was like, oh crap. They might have got me. So this was built on reactors over reactor 3. Now, reactor 3, when he skinned it out, was just a little stump lift because it ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools, 8 reactor cores, and in the fuel pools and the reactor core. So 9 reactor cores ejected right out of the building. And it's hard to appreciate how big the buildings are. They're 150 feet wide by 150 feet wide. And then they're 19 stories, 65 meters, 190 feet tall. So that, what you're looking at, that part up right there, and you can see a person stood up there. They built this off-site, and then they brought it in and assembled it, right? With cranes. Everything's held together by gravity. So that part right there is this part right there. And that part is taller than that. Or that, or this. So if you took that bottom part there reactor 4, and that part right there, it probably comes up to about right here where my finger is. The fuel pool's reactor core is at the top of the building, so they successfully covered it up. So why is the common spent fuel pool pixelated out? It's on the same street as reactor 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, once they detonate, you're not going in there and going to work and getting away with it. And the media now, there's 71 of these reactors in the United States. They're exactly identical. Colors, scale, everything's exact. And so North American media, some of the European media like BBC, you have Australia's CBS, ABC behind me, Cecilia Vega is now the press secretary at the White House for CBS. At the top of you see CBS, that's Seth Dorn. Seth Dorn is a senator's son. That's Rupert Winfield Hayes, who done the same thing, claimed he was on top of Reactor 3. And CNN, well, you expect them to be scumbags anyway, right? That's just a fraction of the media claiming that they were at the top 150 feet above the stump of Reactor 4. Like, nobody goes at the top of... They built these contraptions, but that's all they are. They're just meant to manipulate you and make you complacent and incapable of rationalizing the truth, right? So if you come here and you're being honest and you're trying to comprehend it and understand it, and this is your first, second time here, right? This information you would never find on your own, but now that you know it, now that you can take screen captures of it, now that you can visualize it, now you can see the enormity of what's really going on and how unconscionably insidious your media actually is to pretend they're on a building that don't even exist. The government has negotiated with 24 landowners, blah, 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 blah. 6 years passed since the outbreak of the Fukushima, blah, blah, blah. That was 2017. And in many cases, people have asked for the waste to be removed so they can extend or rebuild their homes. And so this is how complacent they've made the population. They think they can go back to the nuclear wasteland if they remove the 1-ton bags and rebuild their home in a nuclear wasteland. Rebuild their homes or resume farming activities. And notice how often that particular connotation shows up. Why would you go back farming in a nuclear wasteland? You can't get rid of radioactive fallout. You can't burn it and destroy it or anything like that. You can't put it in incinerators and mitigate it. Nothing. New minister vows to tackle tainted soil. And the stuff we're talking about is not tainted. It's incredibly radioactive. It's at 100,000 atoms per kilogram of just gamma. And for this entire time, for 13 years, you refused to acknowledge there's any other types of isotopes can come from a nuclear meltdown, which is pretty... And that creature right there, Uchibori, is a disgusting war criminal. Disposing of Fukushima contaminated soil, 2018. So he wants you to think of a 20-kilometer zone. And that's a big mistake. In Washington, which is going to be true for the entire country, hang on here. In Washington, United States, by Vancouver, Canada, high concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest. Now, Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Caldicott, you'll see their names there. They're telling people in endless interviews that reactor 3 and 4 didn't melt down. The fuel pools didn't melt down. That they got all the fuel out of reactor 3 and 4 fuel pool. And what the industry is doing is they're trying to direct you to Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldicott. And they're going to say, well, that never happened. that and they were in the stories with this media pretending they're on a building. They were backing up. They were interviewed for the same stories, and they didn't come out and disavow what these people were doing. Arnie Gunnarsson made the racks for the fuel assemblies, for the fuel pools, 150 feet above the stump. So if he doesn't know, who knows? He made those assembly racks for 71 reactors, identical reactors in the United States. And Helen Caldicott, of course, was a spokesperson, a pro-nuclear spokesperson for the nuclear industry for a couple of decades. And Arnie married her. Do you really think for 1 second that Arnie is not the devil? So they want you to think of 20 kilometers when you got to realize the entire planet, all the fresh water, all the oceans were severely contaminated. So this is the topsoil. They're actually dumping the topsoil out and putting a tarp on it. 2021, was it? This is the very definition of insanity. And they actually have conveyor belts where they take the homeless people, they get on both sides of the conveyor belts and they pick out sticks and rocks and stuff like that. So you know they're going to get sick and die in the very near future, right? Within weeks or days or months. Certainly they're going to die from those exposures. Some of them are being crushed right at the site, by the way. In order to get rid of the incredible volume, they're doing different things to try to bring the numbers down. It's unconscionable to do that. What they're doing, this is not anybody that you should ever want to trust. The nuclear industry has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The best thing, anyway, they got kids in a nuclear wasteland because their parents are complacent, believes the nuclear industry. Like going around and digging up topsoil, and wearing paper suits, the same paper suits they were wearing for COVID, which was I'm glad James mentioned that earlier, because that really drives the point home, right? But I mean, they got 150,000 sites of 1-ton bags. That should tell you, it would take them, because you can only fit, I think it's 7 bags in these trucks. These are 7-ton trucks. And I can't remember the number. If they had a fleet of them trucks and they could barely move. Each day they could only move a very small amount, right? So they break open these bags, which are deteriorated after a couple of years. They put it through a shifting machine for rocks, bigger rocks, and then the soil itself, they're picking out branches, and they just dump it in there. And then now they dump it in these areas. I mean, this industry is insane. They're also growing, they're doing the same thing with farmland and growing food in the nuclear wasteland. And they got all the media pandering to them every step of the way. They got the locals who want to go back to the nuclear wasteland because they don't really appreciate it. Some of them do. This particular story, they were mocking those people there. The audience here, the homeowners that were evacuated, were actually mocking. You consider this is the final disposal area, don't you, he says. I'm not sure if it is correct to say final disposal, because he says there's a difference between final disposal and reuse. You can't reuse radioactive fallout. And the people that suggest that are horrifying, just horrifying people, right? we struggled to get our show tonight, did we? Just to get the connection was insane. There was no way to mitigate it, right? They had a tsunami 6 to 1,200 kilometers of the coastline was torn apart, and like the tsunami ran right through the nuclear plant, right on through it. That's the Fukushima site itself. And so there was, once the first reactor melted down, or blew up, like reactor 1 blew up, was the first one to blow up, right? I'll show you a picture of that in a second. So once you had that detonation, you're spreading fuel rods all over that area, right? You're not going back in there. They're going to catch fire. The zirconium cladding will catch fire. And that's why you see so much, well, it looks like smoke, but it's actually zirconium cladding detonating. It catches fire immediately when it's exposed to air. And one of those buildings, of course, was reactor 3. That was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. Once that one detonated, you are not going back in there. No one's going back in there. And the only ones who would go back in there would have died shortly after. Because you have fuel rods landing everywhere. And so the cover story was, right from the get-go, they came out with the cover story. I think we covered some legacy headlines on Sunday's show, did we? And the average person has spent their whole life being told that anthropogenic man-made radiation is like a banana. And it's like natural stuff, right? They conflate it with the natural stuff, like bananas and potato chips and whatever. You don't pick up 30 million one-ton bags because... now, Tokyo was 240 kilometers away. Tokyo is so radioactive that no one should live there. It's clear, right? And then one of the worst things about this was they sprayed salt water on the reactors. That was a fatal flaw. So when you sprayed the salt water, because they didn't have fresh water, the whole coast was torn apart. Then this uranol peroxide hydrogen buckyball is produced. Uranol peroxide hydrogen buckyball creates these spherical balls from the sulfur of the salt water hitting these high temperatures. And now they can ingest uranium, plutonium, and it's very mobile. It's very mobile, and it's lethal. Now, Canada's a pro-nuclear place, so I'm in kind of one of the worst places you would want to go to. For radioactive fathers. Bear with me. Let me try another route. Hope everybody's doing good. You can call into these shows if you're so inclined. 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Maybe I got it here. Here we go. It's kind of important, so let me see here. So, how do you suppose the contaminated soil is not just limited to Fukushima? The same scenario is playing out in 7 other prefectures: Iwate, Miyagi, Ibaraki, Tochigi, Guma, Saitama, and Chiba, which of course is right alongside of Tokyo. We're 20 kilometers away from Tokyo. So that was just those 7 places. But the food was banned by 14 prefectures. In 14 prefectures, I'll show you that coming again, by 55 countries. Now last year, it wasn't last year, 10 billion crab, 2023, yeah. October, they announced 10 billion snow crab vanished, which is 4.5 times more than all the crabs were ever harvested in Alaska. Try wrapping your mind around that statement, which collapsed the industry. They don't know what happened. Mass die-offs could become more common in the future. That could be, but will be. Yeah, and I had copied a couple of my sessions, but I'm still missing a lot of stuff because we're using a new one tonight. Let me see. It's a terrible industry, isn't it? Telling lies is the only thing they're actually good at. They accelerate at it. It's like effortless for them, too. And the victims that work doing the work is absurd. I'm just burnt out. We made it through. We got a severe windstorm. Right now it's it's gusting around 50 kilometers out there. But over the next 4 hours, it's going to go up to about 150 kilometer an hour gusts. And a lot of the gusts will be around 120, 130. But we're going to see it spike way past that, obviously, because that's how it works, right? And that's going to go on through the night. And I got a leak in my roof. And I went up today and I got a really heavy tarp that I got a whole bunch of, we're going to have torrential rain in the morning. And I had went up and put a tarp on it last week. And that stopped it. But I had to go up again today and put more chunks of steel and those big cylinder bricks on hopefully that survives. And if not, I got to climb on the roof in 75, 80 mile per hour wind and fix it if it's still there for a rough night. I'm not going to be sleeping tonight. I'm setting an alarm clock for 4 o'clock. And I got a tough night, tough day tomorrow ahead of me. And the whole thing is, like, I can do a 12-hour show, and I'm not going to get near covering all the information that we need to cover. That scares me, eh? Let me see what else we got for you. Yeah, and my apologies because I'm not full of piss and vinegar tonight. I get that. I had a tough gig trying to get this operation just running. I was literally starting to panic. I'm used to them attacking me, but I'm not used to having to struggle to get my gear up and running. That's not normal. Okay, let me just switch gears here. My apologies for not being my usual chippy, cheery self. It's hard sometimes when you're talking about such a morbid subject, right? You can't. It's hard to talk about nuclear without it being salacious, without it being invoking fear, without it being alarming, right? And it is alarming when all your crabs disappear and you got nowhere. You're going to try to do the typical clown act and say it's climate change. But what is climate change? Climate change is real. It's actually real. It's 80 years of nuclear emissions. The emissions never go away. It's bioaccumulation for 80 years. From 1,000 fuel pools creating plumes that covers the whole planet every day. How are we doing here anyway? What time is it? It's 11:52. I'm usually like almost ran out of energy by now. I am ran out of energy, but it's usually because we've done a good show. We done a good show tonight, but it was I'm just going to run through some headlines. I know I'm not going to last much longer because I got to get a few hours sleep. I got to get up 4:30 or something and go to war in a not snowstorm. Thank goodness. Let me see what we got here. Yeah, okay, so we're not going to go past our normal time. It's just still a respectable show. I might have to do another show tomorrow to make up for the screw up tonight. If we got any energy left tomorrow, we'll do a show. Is this the one? Yeah, this might be it. Hello doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. The first studies they're going to do after a nuclear accident is autism and Down syndrome. And so that should terrify you. The cancer epidemic started in the early 70s after during and after the start of the open-air nuclear testing. Now, all the nuclear weapons detonated underground cracked the earth open and vented it at very high speeds back into the environment. And rain and snow gets down there and melts. And we know some of these underground caverns that were created by nuclear bombs, today, the temperature in them are over 400 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. So it's probably criticality clearly going on down there. Child's risk of cancer from radiation is actually 1,000 times higher than adults, but it's not. You can't just go cancer because their exposures are going to be mutating stem cells and mutating hormones. So, it's like just to, and they love doing that, just talking about cancer, right? Idaho TV, a large spike in deaths following, particularly infant deaths, in the 14 weeks that they studied. Thyroid cancers last your whole life after the exposures. Thyroid issues. Because you got radioactive hormones for the rest of your life, see? Fukushima children not growing in weight, average increases are down 75%. Some gained only 1 pound in a year. Imagine keeping kids in a nuclear wasteland and then giving them dosimeters that they can't read, their parents can't read, that is sent away to like Imperial College of London or Berkeley University or Harvard University or Idaho National Laboratories or Chalk River National Laboratories in Canada. So, and they'll continue to follow these kids and study them for their entire life. And they'll have tons of money to throw at them to do the studies on top of that. It's hard to imagine something much more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters strapped to their necks. The only thing harder to imagine is that everybody sits silent. And that's the only reason they can do this to kill children is because everybody is silent. If you shine light on this industry immediately starts to crumble. If there's 1,000 people out there talking about this every day for a couple of months, that'd be the end of the industry. If there's 1,000 people out there regurgitating just a percent of the documentation I cover each month, the industry's dead. It's dead. There's zero possibility of recovering from that kind of exposure. Inhaling just one hot particle, and everything from a nuclear meltdown to follow is a hot particle. When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags, every kilogram is 100,000 hot particles. And this guy was bought off after, but his original studies showed a single particle, and BC was hit with, and the United States was hit with 220 million, or 20 million particles of iodine-131. The particle is physical, is fairly big, see? It's nasty as hell. cesium-137 immediately damaged the heart muscles. So what's it going to be like in a nuclear wasteland? When radioactive gamma enters the body, 75% of it lodges in the muscles. And the big problem is not, the muscle is like your heart, your thyroid glands too. Gamma will go, all gammas, not just iodine-131, goes to the thyroid. No matter where it's doing in your body, it's affecting everything else in your body too, because it's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. Xenon is known to bombard the body with powerful X-rays. A pregnant woman who gets 2 X-rays, the child is 50% less likely to graduate from school. Imagine what happens to insects and birds and mammals and animals that are getting powerful X-rays all day. They stop reproducing, right? And so over 6 or 7 years, you don't have to clean your windshield in the summertime anymore. And that's permanent. When the insects go, we go. 23% higher incidences of childhood leukemia within 16 kilometers of a nuclear disease factory. Students, not like school students, not Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford or Oxford University or MIT University or Imperial College of London are building robots to work at Fukushima, not the major institutions, not the shakers and movers, not There's a ton of companies out there with humanoid robots. Like Boston Dynamic is not building humanoid robots to work at Fukushima, for instance, because they won't work there. Radiation forecast withheld by the government. Releasing it would cause unnecessary panic. Is this the same unnecessary panic where they panicked and picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland? Yeah. Prime Minister contemplated evacuating, and we got tons of headlines about that over many months, contemplated evacuating 30 million from Tokyo, and they should have. They still should. Tokyo, the numbers in Tokyo are just, why is anybody still there? Because they pretended reactor 4 and reactor 3 didn't melt down. So they didn't evacuate them. Did because of fear of mass panic and chaos. Said eastern Japan might collapse. Yeah, so it should. It is what it is. But leaving everybody there to be a victim, how is that not insanely criminal? How is that not the worst crimes against humanity conceivable? Leaders of Fukushima City, which is over 300,000 people, refused to evacuate the population of 400,000 rather, after being asked by the government. Media didn't report this, thinking it would cause a panic. You see those connotations all the time. Well, we didn't want people to panic. Yeah, but that's why you got like 100 sirens around a typical nuclear plant so people can panic. Because you only get one kick at that can. I'm panicked because there isn't a panic. Radiation forecast in Japan kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. To avoid panic in the whole... Over and over and over we see that connotation. No. Panic was the right and appropriate response. It's the only response that you should have, is panic and get out of harm's way. Because once you're breathing it in, it's too late. Leaving them there are just cowards. They're such cowards. That's one thing we see about the nuclear industry, just cowards. Isn't it? We see it over. I've never seen a time when it wasn't just cowards in the nuclear industry. It's just perpetual cowards. Such cowards. Ultimate Insider. Prime Minister contemplated evacuating 30 million from Tokyo. He didn't because of panic. Well, clearly he should have. Children with little 11 atoms a kilogram will start to see heart problems. There was 1 million atoms per kilogram at the school after being decontaminated. But 11 causes permanent health problems per kilogram. So 60 million atoms per kilogram per square meter where the children stand up and spin around. The United Nations says you wouldn't expect to see any health problems. They really are the worst humans imaginable. Well, you can call them humans. I'm not going to. I don't know how you can call anybody at UN a human. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you pretend that 30 million one-ton bags of radiation doesn't matter. I don't know how you can keep people in a nuclear wasteland and pretend that you're a good person. I got no concept of that. I've rallied against it forever. I've been at this for seems like since, I can't remember doing anything else even though I have. But this is the most important, the most vital story in history. And getting it right, not making any mistakes so that other people can extrapolate on their own through the documentation. So if you watch a whole week of my presentations or shows, what happens is you become very, very good at extrapolating documentation on your own. You're not going to fall for the scams, the bananas, the potato chips, the walking sunshine, deceit and dishonesty anymore, right? Kevin G donated $33 this week. Thank you, Kevin. We are struggling. Anything left over my pension has to go into the operation. Anything we raise has to go immediately back into the operation. I got to stop. I got to start taking care of myself at some point. I'm just terrified the operation will fall apart if I don't dedicate everything I got to it, right? Because we don't raise a lot of money to keep this operation. Ideally, we need to raise $3,000 or $4,000 a month to keep this operation operational. I would be very active if I was able to. And I'm heartbroken because we don't get it. We don't get this time back. And we don't have anybody else out there to fill the gap. And so if we don't do the work, who's going to do the work? Who's going to tell the story? And so at least I can do this part, right? But I get pretty depressed sometimes about it because I can't do things that I know I need to do. I can't get out and be active. Like I need a new outboard engine for my big boat, right? That's $10,000. I got no way of coming up with that because I got my whole life now dedicated to this, and it's simply not right. The world deserves somebody having the latitude to do the things that are necessary, right? And if you can help, that'll be incredibly helpful. You can go down in my description of these videos. This is the current video you're watching. And right underneath this video, just click that. And scroll down and you'll see James's site right there. We're going to go look for one of his songs to close out here in a minute. My backup site, YouTube won't let me have a backup site. So my BitChute channel is my backup site. If I open up a YouTube channel, they close it immediately within 2 hours. So, and I have another phone where I go out and I buy a new SIMS card. That phone is brand new. The SIM card is brand new. I open up a YouTube account. 2 hours later, it's closed. I broke their regulations by having a backup account. So go buy another SIMS card, put it into the phone a few days later, do the same thing, get a brand new phone number, and they'll close down that YouTube account. So the best one is the BitChute because now you can actually live stream over there. No one's bought any shirts. I think one or two in the last 4 months or something. But there was a point where we were just selling them constantly. And then it wouldn't let me make any more shirts, and we didn't sell any. So you can donate directly to my site. PayPal is right there. That's directly to Dana. You can't make a mistake. And you don't need a PayPal account to donate. And you can donate at my website with credit cards. And it takes just about everything else too. So you can also donate with any of these at my website on that same where you're going to do a credit card, put the number in there. Any of them will work too. But if I don't ask, then I don't raise anything. If I don't raise anything, it's very difficult to do the things that are necessary, right? Should Japan dump the 30 million one-ton bags of radiation on Japan's federal government building steps? Well, hell yeah, that's the start, isn't it? We got 28 votes. Hi, everybody. We got 28 votes. We're going to enter right there. We're going to scoot over to James Lucid's site, see if we can find a song. Well, we know we can find a song. I get around 5 or 6 subscribers a month. James gets around 20 a day. So awesome anyway. He's somebody in the industry. He's up to 1.48 today. It's crazy. That Nuclear Jamaica, I think we'll play that song again. He's got a lot of great songs there. I can't remember the other songs. But I don't mind hearing Nuclear Jamaica again. That's for sure. We'll see everybody on the next site. Or I could very well do a show tomorrow. Who knows what day that? We'll see everybody Sunday anyway, regardless, right? You have a great night. Don't forget to subscribe to James. He's got 180 songs almost there now, or a little bit more. That is insane, anti-nuclear songs. And he's got so many different genres. I think maybe actually we'll play the Calm Down Charlie song tonight. Let's play that song. It's one of his first songs he put out, Calm Down Charlie. We'll play that song tonight because we haven't played that for a little while. Have a great night. We'll see everybody on the next one. Like I say,
in the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division fueled by heated dreams.